Hi. In this video, I'm going to talk about matriarchal and patriarchal forces and how they show up in fatherhood. The concepts of matriarch and patriarch typically come up in conversations about social or political structures. This is going to be a little different, so we're going to put that to the side. Instead, we're going to think about these as underlying archetypal structures that we have internalized. We have the matriarchal and the patriarchal, which represent different aspects or ways of being. And when we move into fatherhood, we experience a call to change, to evolve or expand in some way. But that evolution, that shifting, doesn't happen in just one fixed direction. And there's a lot of discourse about what people think we should be as fathers. Maybe we need to be these ordered, structured, stern disciplinarians, or maybe we need to be a little more flexible, soft, yielding fathers. But these qualities, represented in the duality I've outlined, are overly simplistic. Instead, what is going on underneath the surface of fatherhood is much deeper, and it points to this essential human experience, one that represents a bit of a push-pull between a matriarchal and a patriarchal way of being in the world. And it's really easy to overlook or oversimplify this underlying experience, to see the symptoms but not the core issue. And so let's work on clarifying this by exploring what these two sides entail. We live in a patriarchal society. And that's more than just having leaders who are men. It means that our modern day-to-day life, our experience of things, are shaped by patriarchal norms. I want to talk a little bit about what these norms are, but using the lens of fatherhood. And going back to Uranus, the original father, he was the sky. He was this unordered, airy expanse. But in that expanse, we experience this consistency, these structures. Stars become constellations. We create stories around these constructs in the sky. At night, a bright star will give us direction, and during the day, the brightest star gives us a sense of safety, connection, and consistency. While the moon is constantly shifting its face, the sun gives us this consistent cycle. Bringing that back down to a human level, we think about the patriarchal as being creating structure and order out of the chaos. It's about setting routines. It's about living by a schedule or by a clock. It's about identifying our goals and incrementally working towards them. And that's oftentimes how it shows up in our lives as fathers, is we're creating these structures, these routines. We identify when we are going to complete certain tasks, when we're going to get up in the morning, when we're going to get off to daycare or off to school, when we're going to eat meals together, what the plans are for the weekend, how we're going to do that, what are the logistics of all of this. And that's part of the archetypal experience of fatherhood, is that there's more of an emphasis on being outside, that those initial representations to our children of the external world, of the other beyond the caretaking, nurturing relationship. And we can see that historically, a lot of fathers have leaned into this aspect, being out in the world, being at their job, or being the provider for their family, as well as being the disciplinarian, being the one who sets the rules and the structure. The old adage, wait until your father gets home. And while that would be one extreme, we can see in general how this perspective of patriarchal might be helpful. It creates order, it creates consistency, and in doing so creates safety. But there's also a cost, that it limits a certain amount of spontaneity, the ability to be present, and also limits the importance of the kind of natural rhythm that occurs in the natural world. And right there you can see I'm starting to point towards some of these matriarchal forces. Because as fathers, we also experience the matriarchal. And just like I traced the patriarchal back to Uranus, I want to go back to Gaia as a matriarchal force. And keeping in mind that Gaia was Earth. She was this unseen force of growing and nurturing something of substance. That the seeds planted in the earth, we don't get to see them growing, sprouting, taking in the nutrients. We just see them as they come up into the light of the sun. And so too with all these natural fluctuations, the weather, the seasons, the tides, all ebb and flow in ways that can sometimes feel surprising. And so there can be a sense of surrendering to these magnificent forces that are beyond our control. And again, human sizing this. We think about the matriarchal showing up in ways that allows things to flex and flow and move at their own pace. That values and appreciates that things are changing, things are growing without us noticing it. That there are these internal processes, these internal worlds that exist and are important, and that it doesn't exist in isolation. That all of this is interconnected, and that it will continue to occur without our intervention. And this could mean that our child eats when they're hungry instead of when we have time to eat, that they're going to sleep when they're tired instead of when we have time to sleep. They're going to laugh when they find something humorous, or they're going to cry when they find something upsetting. It just is. They are naturally and wholly present for this experience, for being alive. And I imagine that you are now picking up on some of this tension. And hopefully you feel a little of that. On one side, the patriarchal, let's create consistency, let's create order out of chaos. And on the other side, this matriarchal, things have a certain rhythm, we can't control them or force them. We need to allow things to emerge as they naturally will. And in that way, our children can oftentimes become a powerful teacher in our lives. Infants and children live in a matriarchal structure. They're just naturally occurring. They're doing what feels right for them in the moment. And this can bring our awareness to the fact that maybe we've gotten a little wrapped up in the patriarchal. It makes me smile and laugh because there have been so many times where I've thought, just hurry up and eat because we've got to get to this thing. What is this thing? And I'm hitting my wrist, alluding to a watch, as if that structure has any significance or importance to a child. In that way, they're bringing our attention to what it means to be more fully present, disconnect from these constructions that we have, and so too become aware of the ways that we need to support them in understanding how to create a balance between the matriarchal and the patriarchal. And as fathers, we are caught between these two worlds, this tension between the matriarchal and the patriarchal. We do exist in the patriarchal world. We need to bring a sense of order and structure. And we also exist in the matriarchal, that things will only emerge and exist when we are ready. My daughter walks when she's ready, she runs when she's ready, she talks when she's ready, she reads when she's ready. Everything happens when she's ready, and much of what prepares her for being ready is happening under the surface. Both of these are necessary. And if we are only one-sided, then we're missing an important aspect of this experience. Instead, both exist in a tension with each other. But what this looks like for each of us is a challenge. And parenting isn't about just letting everything go or controlling everything, but again, some sort of mix there. Speaking metaphorically, is the patriarchal like a jar that holds the matriarchal cricket inside, keeping it safe, keeping it contained, allowing it to express its freedom, but within certain boundaries? Or is the matriarchal more like a loaf of bread, with all of these ingredients separate and distinct that merge together in this unseen process of expansion? While the patriarchal are the nuts or the fruits that are put into that bread, still retaining their individual unique identity therein. And while I can't tell you the right fit or the right ratio, I hope that you start to hear or even feel how these metaphors reflect this nuance, this tension between these polarities. In many ways, it's like the yin and the yang of fatherhood, these interdependent forces that combine into something unique. That without the matriarchal, the patriarchal becomes overly rigid and controlling. And without the patriarchal, the matriarchal becomes chaotic and diffuse. And so fatherhood lies in that space, that tension, embracing this paradox. We don't necessarily fully resolve it or solve it, but instead live in that tension. And I invite you to embrace this paradox, to explore how it shows up in your own life. And in what ways do you experience tension about falling on one side or the other? Be more patriarchal or more matriarchal. If you're a new parent, notice where this tension comes up. Is it pushing you in some direction that you felt like you haven't before? If you're a seasoned parent, thinking about how is this still present for you? How have you worked through this ongoing evolution of tension between the matriarchal and patriarchal? Because the goal is not to eliminate tension. Tension is energy, it's power. And let's bring that into our lives to creatively respond to the challenges of fatherhood. And that tension allows for something to emerge. Because fatherhood is not either matriarchal or patriarchal. It's also not both matriarchal and patriarchal. Instead, it is neither patriarchal nor matriarchal. And that neither nor allows for something new to emerge. And that newness that emerges in that tension is unique to each of us because each of us find a way to transcend that tension. Because fatherhood invites us deeper into that tension, to hold those opposing forces or opposing truths and remaining open to what emerges. And that is a real adventure. And with that, I wish you well in holding this tension and in finding something new that is uniquely you. Thanks.